Hi everyone. Today we are going to have our second lesson in our new unit, Wild West. We will begin to read this text, Explore the Wild West, written by Anita Yasuda and illustrated by Emmanuel Cerisier. So, as we're preparing to read this text, what I'd like you to do is really look at the cover and see what you notice. What do you think that this text is going to be mostly about? Explore the Wild West is an informational text, which means it's going to give us real information and factual findings about the topic of the Wild West. So as we read, you will notice that they have broken up the text into different sections, and each section will have a different central idea or main idea that's supported by details, which include facts and quotations. We will also see headings, and we will notice that different sections have a different text structure. We will also see words that are specific to the topic or the subject area. And we'll also see visuals that will help us understand more about the topic of the Wild West. So before we begin to read, what I'd like you to do is on page 250, you're going to answer the question, what do you know about the Wild West and what do you want to learn? So for today, our learning target is I can synthesize new ideas from information presented in an informational text. When we're synthesizing information, we're really thinking about what do we know coming in to a text. So I know this because of my experiences in life. And then we're going to read, and as we're reading, we're thinking, what am I learning about? Now that I'm reading, I'm thinking because, and then by the end of the text or the section, we're going to have a new understanding. So as we read, we're going to continue with our essential question, what character traits were needed in people who settled the West? So before I begin to read, I want to start synthesizing some information. So going into this text, I know that the Wild West had to do with settlers and pioneers and Native Americans that were all living together during a certain period of time. And I know that because of the first text that we read yesterday. And so as I read, I want to be able to add in some more information about what are they talking about when we're really thinking about the Wild West. So I'm going to synthesize that information that I know from before, and then I'm going to try and add more information. So I'm thinking that it has to do with a place right now. Where was the Wild West? The Wild West was more than just a place. Ooh, okay, so I'm already knowing that I'm going to have to add in some more information. It was more than Western lands beyond the Mississippi River. It was a time of pioneers, cowboys, and Native Americans. It was a time of cowgirls and pioneer women, stagecoaches, saloons, outlaws and lawmen, buffalo hunting, and bank robbers. When we think of what we think of as the time of the Wild West started in the early 1800s. By the mid-1800s, when gold was discovered in California, everyone was talking about the Wild West. This period of time lasted until the frontier was closed in 1890. Ooh, okay. So at first I was just thinking that it was a location. But now as I read, I notice that it also has to do with a time period. So when we're talking about the Wild West, I'm thinking about the western part of the United States, or what is the United States today, but it's also a time period between in the middle of the 1800s, so maybe the 1850s to the 1890s. So that gives me a better idea of what we're talking about when somebody says the Wild West. The original American frontier was the Mississippi River, but the frontier pushed west towards the Pacific Ocean as tens of thousands of people moved westward. Stories of plenty of good farmland for everyone made the West sound amazing. Many pioneers went to Oregon or other places because the land was free. When gold was discovered, more and more people moved there, hoping to strike it rich. So as we look at the map, I notice that there's a key, and it shows that there's the Oregon Trail, the California Trail, the Santa Fe Trail, and then the Great Plains. So I notice that there are different ways that people would cross. Oh, well, that one's a river, so don't follow that one. That there would be different routes that people would take to cross the United States, and some went longer and some went shorter. How America grew. How did America get new land for people to explore and settle? In 1803, the United States doubled its size with a single purchase of land, the Louisiana Purchase. The leader of France, Napoleon Bonaparte, sold the Louisiana Territory to President Thomas Jefferson. This area included parts or all of the present-day states of Louisiana, Missouri, Arkansas, Texas, Iowa, Minnesota, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. Now that America reached far to the west, President Jefferson needed a map of the area. He sent two men named Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to do the job. He hoped that they would discover a water route across the continent. Lewis and Clark and their 50-person team explored the West from 1804 to 1806, becoming the first new Americans to see the Pacific Ocean. A French-Canadian trapper and his Native American wife, Sacagawea, translated for Lewis and Clark. This allowed them to speak to the Native Americans they met along the way. When Native American people saw Sacagawea, they believed the group was peaceful. Lewis and Clark kept detailed journals of the plants and animals they discovered. They wrote about the Native Americans they met. Along the way, they sent boxes of seeds, bones, animal skins, and even a live prairie dog back to President Jefferson. After Lewis and Clark's successful 2-year expedition, many explorers, scientists, map makers, and missionaries headed west on the Oregon Trail. Fur traders, often called mountain men, went west along the Oregon Trail too. These men trapped beaver and other small animals. They also traded many goods with Native Americans, such as rifles and steel knives for more beaver pelts. Mountain men used their knowledge of the land to guide soldiers and explorers. Now and then. Then, the American government paid France $15 million for the Louisiana Territory. Now, today, this land would cost billions of dollars. Did you know Lewis and Clark's journey still has an effect on our lives today? Many of their routes are used for railways and highways. Their plant specimens are also studied by scientists. We even use some of Lewis and Clark's place names, like Camp Fortunate in Montana. The trails and posts used by these explorers and mountain men guided the pioneers who came to settle the land west of the Mississippi River. Men, women, and children heading west walked, pushed hand carts, and rode on horses and in wagons. Few knew how hard and long the journey would be. So today, what I want you to do is think about what kind of information can you add onto your thinking. So what were you thinking before we started this text? And as you've been reading it, what are you thinking now?